In the summer of 336 BC, a wedding celebration in Aegea suddenly turned into a bloody slaughterhouse. When Pausanias's dagger pierced Philip II's chest, the fate of the entire ancient world was completely rewritten.
However, what is truly shocking is not the king's death, but how this young man, only 20 years old, will use just 2 years to go from a prince who almost lost his throne to a conqueror who makes the entire known world tremble.
A bloody succession to the throne, barbarian tribes in the north, rebellious Greek city-states, and a 1,000-year-old city that is about to be reduced to ashes in a raging fire. This is the cruel reality that young Alexander must face.
News of Philip II's death spread like wildfire throughout Macedonia. In this kingdom that prized force, the throne was never an automatic gift, but rather a trophy fought for with blood and sword. Alexander's first enemy wasn't the Persians or the Thracian barbarians, but members of his own royal family.
Amyntas IV, Philip's nephew, held a legitimate claim to the throne. Some conservative nobles considered this experienced, mature man more suitable to rule Macedonia than the young, impulsive Alexander. Adding to the danger, Philip's last wife, Cleopatra, had just given birth to a baby boy who also held a bloodline claim to the throne.
However, Alexander's most powerful ally was none other than his most formidable mother, Olympias. This queen from Epirus was renowned for her cruelty and cunning. Her revenge was swift and brutal. Olympias not only killed Cleopatra and her infant child, but also forced her to commit suicide over her child's body. This extreme cruelty was considered excessive even in the ancient world.
Over the next few months, the Macedonian palace became a slaughterhouse. Amyntas IV died under mysterious circumstances, and all remaining royal claimants to the throne were either killed or exiled. Alexander established the foundation of his rule with a bloody purge. But eliminating the royal rivals was only the first step. The real challenge lay in gaining the loyalty of the army and generals. Macedonia's military nobles harbored doubts about the young king. Could he lead them to victory as his father had? The key figure was Antipater, one of Philip II's most trusted generals. This experienced veteran commander commanded the heart of the Macedonian army. Alexander wisely retained his position and pledged to continue his father's expansionist policies. Many viewed the young Alexander as impulsive and reckless, but historical records show that he displayed political maturity beyond his years in handling the succession crisis. Rather than launching a wholesale purge of his father's former subordinates, he quickly consolidated his power through selective violence and shrewd personnel arrangements. When news of Philip's death reached the Greek city-states, it caused an uproar. Demosthenes of Athens even celebrated openly in the assembly, calling it the god's punishment for the tyrant. Many city-states began secretly plotting to break free from Macedonian control. The Thebans sprang into action, expelling the Macedonian garrison and reclaiming their independence. Athens secretly provided Thebes with weapons and financial support.
The entire Greek world seemed to be waiting for the young king to make a mistake. The bloody purge of the succession was only the beginning. The true test young Alexander would face came from the restless barbarian tribes to the north and the covetous Greek city-states to the south. His response would determine the future of the Macedonian Empire.
In the spring of 335 BC, Alexander made a decision that shocked everyone. Instead of heading south to pacify Greece, he would head north to conquer the Thracian and Illyrian tribes. This decision seemed crazy at the time. Why would he provoke those barbaric tribes? The answer lies in Alexander's strategic vision. He understood that in order to safely carry out the Persian expedition, Macedonia's northern border had to be absolutely secure. Moreover, this war would be the perfect test of his military prowess.
The Thracians were renowned for their bravery and brutality. Living in rugged, mountainous terrain, they were adept at guerrilla warfare. Many Greek city-states suffered at their hands. But Alexander had a secret weapon: speed. His northern campaigns set a new record for fastest march in ancient military history. His army covered over 500 kilometers in 15 days, a feat that would have been nearly impossible in the absence of modern transportation.
The Battle of Mount Iams showcased Alexander's military genius. Facing the Thracians, who had the advantage of terrain, he chose not to attack head-on, but instead employed a clever tactic. He had his soldiers lie down and form a ramp with their shields, allowing the Thracians' boulders and chariots to slide over them. And then he could suddenly rise and counterattack.
Even more shocking was the Battle of the Danube. When Alexander arrived at the Danube, he found a large Get army gathered on the other side, trying to prevent him from crossing the river. The traditional approach would have been to find a ford or wait for a better opportunity. But Alexander once again chose his most daring move: a nighttime crossing. He ordered his soldiers to dismantle local houses and use the wood to construct makeshift rafts and pontoon bridges. The entire operation was completed overnight, and at dawn, the Getae were shocked to find 1,500 Macedonian cavalry and 4,000 infantry standing before them. Many believed Alexander relied solely on brute force to conquer, but the northern campaigns revealed him to be a true military innovator. His tactics were inventive, from mountain defenses to river crossings, and every battle demonstrated military thinking ahead of its time.
Just as news of the Thracian victory reached Macedonia, the Illyrians to the northwest began a widespread rebellion. These mountain peoples united, attempting to seize Macedonia's western territories while Alexander was away in Thrace. Alexander faced the first real crisis of his military career. Leading his army into the Illyrian mountains, he found himself surrounded by enemy forces in a narrow valley. With a heavily fortified fortress in front and an enemy force cut off from his retreat behind, it was a perfect trap. In this seemingly hopeless moment, Alexander displayed his greatest military prowess. Instead of panicking, he ordered his troops to perform a military display,
a complex display of formations with forests of spears advancing and retreating in unspoken command, the entire process like a meticulous dance. The true purpose of this display was to intimidate the enemy. Seeing such a well-trained and disciplined army, the Illyrians' morale began to waver. Then, Alexander seized the opportunity and launched a surprise attack, not only successfully breaking through the encirclement, but also capturing the enemy leader. Within a few months, Alexander secured a series of victories in the north, proving his military prowess. But the real test is yet to come. A bigger storm is brewing in the Greek world to the south. Just as Alexander was winning victory after victory in the northern battlefield, a deadly rumor began to spread throughout the Greek world. The young Macedonian king had died in Illyria. This false news was like a torch, igniting the long-simmering rebellion in the Greek city-states.
The reaction was most intense among the people of Thebes. This city, steeped in history, had once been one of Greece's greatest military powers. The Sacred Legion of Thebes, an elite force of 150 pairs of lovers, had defeated the Spartan army at the Battle of Leuctra. The Thebans had reason to believe they could restore their former glory. In the autumn of 335 BC, the Thebans launched an uprising. They attacked the Macedonian garrison, killed the commander, and drove the remaining soldiers from the city. Meanwhile, Theban envoys traveled to Athens and Sparta, seeking support. The entire Greek world awaited the collapse of the Macedonian kingdom. The Theban rebellion was secretly funded by Persian gold. The Persian Empire, long aware of the Macedonian threat, secretly provided funds and weapons to anti-Macedonian forces in Greece.
When Alexander received news of the rebellion in Thebes in Illyria, everyone assumed it would take him at least a month to return to Greece. After all, the journey from the northern mountains of Macedonia to Thebes was over 400 kilometers, and the terrain was difficult to traverse. But Alexander once again created a miracle. He selected the most elite troops, abandoned all heavy equipment, and marched south at a speed of 30 kilometers per day. The army had almost no rest, and the soldiers took turns riding horses, traveling day and night. Just 14 days later, Alexander's army appeared at the gates of Thebes. When the Thebans saw the Macedonian flag, they could hardly believe their eyes. Many thought it was a hallucination or a manifestation of God. Alexander did not launch an immediate attack. Instead, he sent envoys to Thebes with a final offer. If Thebes surrendered the leaders of the rebellion, the others would be pardoned and the city would be spared.
This proposal sparked heated debate in Thebes. Some rational elders advocated accepting Alexander's terms, but many more were driven by national pride and a desire for freedom. Theban military leaders believed that with their strong city walls and brave soldiers, they could withstand a Macedonian siege. History often portrays Alexander as a bloodthirsty conqueror, but in the Theban crisis, he first attempted a diplomatic solution. Only after peaceful efforts failed did he resort to force, demonstrating his mature political skills.
Thebes' response was a resounding rejection. Furthermore, they executed the Macedonian envoy,
a grave diplomatic offense in the ancient world. Alexander knew the door to negotiation was completely closed. The siege began. But this was no ordinary siege. Alexander employed a new type of siege technology, invented by his father, a combination of torsion catapults and siege towers. These advanced siege engines could destroy the city's defenses from a distance. The battle was fierce. The Theban Sacred Legion displayed their legendary courage, refusing to retreat, engaging the Macedonian soldiers in hand-to-hand combat on the city walls. Every inch of the ground was soaked in blood. After 3 days of fierce fighting, the Macedonian army finally broke through the city walls. However, the outcome of the battle wasn't determined by the Macedonian attack, but by a betrayal within Thebes. To save their lives, some Theban nobles secretly opened the city gates, allowing the Macedonian army to enter from the flank. What followed the city's fall shocked the entire ancient world. Alexander issued a cold-blooded order. The city of Thebes was to be completely destroyed, save for its temples, the house of the poet Pindar, and a few families who had surrendered. This decision wiped Thebes off the map. The destruction of Thebes marked the end of the classical age in Greece. It was not only a military victory, but also a political statement. Any city-state that dared to challenge Macedonian hegemony would face the same fate. When the news of the destruction of Thebes reached Athens, the entire city fell into an unprecedented panic. This cradle of democracy, center of philosophy and art, suddenly realized that it might face the same fate. Demosthenes, once an impassioned orator against Macedonian hegemony, was now the first to advocate for peace. He admitted to the council that continued resistance would only bring ruin to Athens. The Athenians even considered handing Demosthenes over to Alexander in exchange for the city's safety. But in the end, they opted for a collective apology. Athens sent an embassy of 10 of its most prominent citizens to Macedonia to ask for mercy, bringing with them rich gifts and the Athenian people's respect for the young king. Alexander's reception of the Athenian envoys showed another side of his political skills. In contrast to his ruthless treatment of Thebes, he showed tolerance and respect to Athens. This distinction was not arbitrary. Alexander was well aware of Athens' special position in the Greek world, not only as a cultural center, but also as a major naval power. If Macedonia were to launch an expedition against Persia, it would need the support of the Athenian fleet. Athens' swift capitulation had a chain reaction. Sparta, while retaining nominal independence, also pledged not to interfere with Macedonian actions. Other Greek city-states sent envoys to express their obedience. In the winter of 335 BC, Alexander convened a pan-Hellenic assembly in Corinth to re-establish the Greek alliance his father had established and to formally declare war on Persia. At the conference, Alexander was formally elected commander-in-chief of the Greek coalition, gaining the legal authority to launch a war of revenge. While the war was nominally intended to avenge the Persian invasion of Greece, everyone knew the true goal was conquest. Through the destruction of Thebes and the pardon of Athens, Alexander successfully re-established Macedon's absolute dominance over the Greek world. Now he could turn his full attention eastward to the Persian Empire, waiting to be conquered.
In the spring of 334 BC, all of Macedonia was preparing for the upcoming Eastern expedition, which would be one of the largest expeditions in ancient history, requiring unprecedented organization and logistical support.
Alexander assembled 50,000 elite troops, 9,000 Macedonian hoplites, 3,000 shield-bearers, 1,800 cavalry, and allied troops from various Greek city-states. Each branch of the army was carefully selected and trained. Alexander's expeditionary force carried 30 days' rations, but planned to forage for supplies as they advanced. This strategy required the army to maintain extreme mobility without being burdened by heavy baggage.
Maritime transportation was another challenge. Alexander assembled 160 warships and a large number of transport ships to transport troops and equipment to Asia. These ships came from Macedonia, Athens, and other Greek city-states.
Expeditions required enormous sums of money. Historians estimate that Alexander prepared the equivalent of billions of dollars today for this campaign. This money was used to pay soldiers' salaries, purchase equipment, and maintain logistical supplies.
At the same time, Alexander also carried out intensive diplomatic activities. He established contacts with anti-Persian forces in Egypt, conducted secret communications with Greek city-states in Asia Minor, and even sent spies to infiltrate the Persian Empire to gather intelligence.
Geographical knowledge was equally important. Alexander gathered all the information he could find on the geography, peoples, and politics of Asia. He knew that understanding the lands and peoples of his enemies was the key to victory.
Before leaving Macedonia, Alexander had to ensure the security of his homeland. He appointed Antipater as regent, responsible for defending Macedonia and suppressing any Greek rebellion.
At the same time, he left sufficient troops at key strategic points. Elite troops were deployed on the northern border to guard against invasions from Thracians and Illyrians, and important cities in Greece were also monitored by Macedonian garrisons.
In the spring of 334 BC, everything was ready. Alexander led an army of 50,000 to the Hellespont, the famous strait separating Europe and Asia.
When Alexander's fleet sailed towards the coast of Asia, he personally threw his spear across the water, declaring all of Asia his trophies, conquered by force. This symbolic gesture marked the beginning of the greatest conquest in human history.
In just 2 years, this 20-year-old youth rose from a prince nearly dethroned to the hegemon of a unified Greek world. He had proven his strength through blood and thunder, and now the entire known world would bear witness to his legend. From the bloody wedding at Aegean to the heroic expedition across the Hellespont, young Alexander transformed himself from heir to conqueror in just 2 years. The ashes of Thebes became a symbol of his authority, and the surrender of Greece became the foundation of his hegemony. When an army of 50,000 men set foot on Asian soil, no one could have predicted that within the next decade it would conquer the vast territories from the Mediterranean to the Indus River, creating one of the largest empires in human history. The baptism of blood and thunder ended, but the true legend had just begun.